Tonight on the Cover One Buffalo podcast, we are going to talk about new additions: Curtis Samuel, Nicholas Morrow, Mack Hollins, the heart pain that Dion, Dawkins, and Arik Armstead cost me. But first, our guys, Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron,
yo,
Brandon Bean finally did some stuff. How you doing?
I was starting to think he didn't care about winning, about the fans, about our feelings, about how much money we give this team. And then all of a sudden, right around dinner time, I'm getting dinner ready and stuff. And he does care. It turns out that he does want to win and he does want to put a roster together. So congratulations, Brandon Bean. You get to keep your job.
Yeah, it's people were getting a little bit wild. I know, we tried hard to kind of tamper people's expectations. There was going to be a lot of value shopping. There was going to a lot of be, looking for some discounts. We haven't splurged anywhere crazy just yet. So the different pieces that are out there, I still expect more. We'll talk at the end of the show about what spots we still expect to happen, but there's actually been a lot of movement. I think I saw a number 11 previous former Buffalo Bills have signed elsewhere. There's been a lot of movement of former Bills signing in different places. Plenty of those look like they're going to impact comp picks. We've brought back several players. We've added 3 new players, started kind of slowly, 2 kind of fringe depth guys, and then finally more of an impactful signing here tonight. But ultimately, it was kind of an eased in free agency. So the last time that you guys talked to us here, it was after Black Wednesday. We had just seen just a mass exodus of, 7 different players, 5 pretty impactful releases that had happened. And, there was a lot of anxiety about, wow, like, are we really resetting everything? We didn't see a lot of extensions or movement of what we were hoping from there. People were anxious. We hadn't seen a lot of the restructures happen. So a couple small moves since then. We have seen Josh Allen be restructured. And then as things opened up, before any real news happened, there was this wild, a couple people were talking about some posts Dion Dawkins had made. He, was talking about being, walking and not being sure about the future, and made a vague post about, Buffalo will always be home. And then the next day around noontime, he posts that he's leaving, to the point where actually on TV on NFL Network, they read his tweet and said he was being released, which, I'm pretty sure that's not proper journalism. But it was really hard not to interpret that. I'm embarrassed how terminally online I am and how aware of everything is going on. I had to experience all of that. And there was a window of a good 5 minutes before the news came out that he actually re-signed to a 3-year, $60 million extension. What were you experiencing as you went through that window?
Being pissed. I was mad. I was pretty mad during all that. It wasn't
even a little mad after.
Yeah, I was even more mad after. So I was out and about running some errands and stuff, and I saw the tweet, and I'd kind of just written the one off the day before as like, I don't know, players are cryptic. It can mean anything, right? We've seen players just tweet out anything. That first one was cryptic, but then that next day, it was like straight up, goodbye Buffalo. Like, I don't know what my future holds, what's next in my football journey. That's not a joke. That's like telling your buddy, like, hey, I have terminal cancer and I only have 3 weeks to live. And then being like, psych,
fooled you.
That's a joke. It wasn't good sense of humor. But I get it. It's trolling, whatever. That's Dion Dawkins. I don't find that particularly funny. But I was driving around and like trying to scroll and figure out what the heck is going on. And so it wasn't a great moment for me. And I even tweeted out, I was like, really, there's no scenario right now where whatever the outcome of this is, that I'm going to be happy. Like either he's joking and that's going to piss me off.
Yeah, and
or
I'll be
he got
annoyed.
cut and that's going to piss me off. Or
I would
like
have been more mad at that because it didn't make any financial sense
no,
for him to actually be released. So I was mad because like the week before on Black Wednesday, I was hurt emotionally because I invested time and energy rooting for Jordan Poyer and Tre'Davious White and Mitch Morse, and like that hurt the sentimentality of like I didn't want to see those guys cut loose, but like the actual analytical side of my brain, I knew there were possibilities. That's why I listed them on my sheet, because I knew we had the leverage and I knew it was very unlikely they'd be back for that amount of money. There was no sense of Dion being released. So like in that moment, I was like, what? This is just a horrible decision. What is being doing? That this can't be right. And I was furious for a little bit. And then as it came back around, now, not only was it not true, he extended, he's going to be here for the rest of his career, and it's going to create cap space for us and allow nice additions that we're making.
Yes, I love Dion Dawkins, the player. I'm glad he's extended. Again, I've mentioned this one a few times. If you haven't listened to Eric Wood's podcast with Aaron Cromer, they both talk about Dion quite a bit. Actually, Eric Wood references Dion quite a bit in a lot of his podcasts, and just talking about like when he came in and how hard he works and what he means to that team and that fun-loving spirit and stuff. So him being on the Bills is fantastic. Them being able to get him long-term, and he wants to make Buffalo's home. All that's great. But you talked about it, I do hope he had a bit of soggy wings delivered to him that night for a terrible, tasteless joke toying with us.
So a couple other small bits and pieces, some of the other moves, guys who were released that have signed elsewhere. We've actually seen, like I said, I referenced 11. So unfortunately, both Siran Neal and Jordan Poyer have gone down to Miami. Both Mitch Morse and Gabe Davis have gone to Jacksonville. We saw Nyheim Hines in Cleveland. We've seen reports tonight. There's still some details coming out yet. We saw Tim Settle down to Houston. Mm-hmm. We saw Poona Ford out to the Chargers.
I'm sorry if we could give Greg a moment of silence for Poona Ford there.
So I won't lie, I did kind of talk myself into that since Eric Washington was gone, I had convinced myself maybe he was the one who wasn't playing Poona Ford, and that maybe it was all his fault, and that Poona would come back now that Eric Washington was gone. But in all reality, I didn't expect him to come back after the fact we didn't even freaking play him. So good for him going out to the Chargers. Trent Sherfield landed in Minnesota right before the show broke. We saw Terrell Dodson signed out in Seattle. So some of those moves I don't expect to be big ones. We know that there are Leonard Floyd signed in San Francisco.
Yep.
So from a comp pick formula, which I know everyone's got some heartburn over the issue with the calculation and what we thought Tremaine Edmonds would be. We thought it'd be a 3rd round pick and had to be in a 4th round pick. It is what it is. Right now, Gabe Davis will be a 4th round pick. Leonard Floyd will be a 5th round pick. Dane Jackson out in Carolina will be a 6th round pick. I'm assuming that Terrell Dodson will also be around that range. I'm thinking he'll be like a 6th round pick. I would assume that, 2 years, $8 million is a pure guess. It could be somewhere different, but I'm expecting it to be above the $3.5 million cutoff to be the starter out in Seattle. Some of the other ones, Tim Settle looks like it's just under the number. And one of the signings tonight, Curtis Samuel, which we'll get to here in a moment, he will offset the Dane Jackson. Yeah, Nick Corte projected he would cancel out the Dane Jackson one because he was enough below the Leonard Floyd. So right now we'd still be getting a 4th and a 5th for Gabe and Leonard Floyd, plus maybe a 6th for Terrell Dodson. So still getting 3 more draft picks. If we get one more, if somehow Tim Settle did qualify or Poona Ford was somehow above that number, or any of the other remaining guys, if somebody gets a surprise number, maybe it gives us one more freebie. Otherwise, any other signing we do, we'll talk at the end of the show on the other guys we look at. If a guy was released, like a Justin Simmons or a Quandre Diggs at safety versus a Cam Curl would cancel out one of the comp picks. A Justin Simmons or a Quandre Diggs would not, because they were released. So maybe that comes into play. It certainly seems like with the pursuit of one of the players we went after this afternoon, that was a factor in that. So any of those losses that give you heartburn or that you're concerned about, obviously, maybe keeping Mitch Morse would have been one I would have been on board for, but anybody else assigned elsewhere, I didn't really expect to stay.
I didn't either. Saran Neal was a fan favorite of mine in terms of I think he's a special teams ace, but I hate prioritizing special teams when you get the results that the Bills got last year. And so I think some of the guys they brought in, a Mack Hollins, can do that type of thing if you're just going to have an average special teams anyway. But Mitch Morse is the one that really hurts because I do think there's football left. I think there's a good couple years of football left. And again, I said on the show last week, during that slump last year and during the turmoil that this team had, he was that calm voice, at least to the public, and I'm assuming also in the locker room. And
Yes.
I don't know, like that's a hard thing to replace. And you're losing a leader in Jordan Poyer, and you're losing a leader in how he works and the vibe that he brings in Trey White. And so that's a lot of leadership and locker room culture to be losing all at once. But I do think back, try to take off my fan hat for a second, and it is always better to cut bait early than too late. So if they're a year early on cutting off Mitch Morse from this team versus he really hits that wall this year, then it's going to be the right decision. We won't know that, but I trust in them. But that's the one that stings probably the most because I think he could have helped this team.
It's a nice perspective here from Jason.
Yeah.
Starting about 43 million over the cap, and the only loss we are really lamenting is Mitch Morse. Honestly, it's some epic maneuvering by Bean. That's some really good perspective. The fact how much we had to dance around to get back under the cap, and the fact that we're talking about additions that we'll get to here in a moment, that actually is pretty good. That the rest of them we're like, yeah, we'll probably live and we'll probably survive without those guys.
It is. And here's a thing too. Our friend Brett Coleman, friend of the show, I had a disagreement with him a little bit this week because he tweeted out something about like it was a little disingenuous because he didn't add in last year's rookie class too, but saying kind of they haven't hit enough in the rookie classes of Brandon Bean and the drafting, and that should be talked about a little bit more. But with what he's saying, that sort of goes in hand with them being allowed to feel like they can move on from a lot of these players because they've had depth come up the ranks and they feel like they can move on from some of these guys because they have depth pieces, and then they can fill in with cheaper free agents. The 11 picks that they have, they think that they probably can hit on a number of those. So I don't think they're as bad as that at drafting as it seems, or a lot of people like to say. And I think that shows in how they attacked free agency this year and let some of these guys go. Because in years past, they really want to fill all that and bring these guys back and try to get as much of that back as they can. And you're seeing them kind of move on and let that go and trying to get younger and replenish.
Yeah. And in the chat, some folks talking, that Mitch wasn't perfect. He did have the risk of concussion issues. He had played a lot more games than people let on.
Yeah.
He was never going to be the best anchor against the Quinn and Williams of the world and things like that. He was always going to be on the smaller side of what, some big centers can be, but he still got out in space really well.
I was going to say his athleticism allowed that run game to do some stuff that other teams can't really do in the run game.
Yeah, and I'm going to be curious what Connor McGovern does. Connor McGovern's a plus athlete for a center. That'll be interesting to see. By Omari here, both Dawson Knox and Von Miller taking pay cuts was a huge addition. We haven't seen the exact details on Dawson Knox number yet, but that'll be a big one.
Must be terrible to play in Buffalo with guys taking pay cuts.
Yeah, guys
must
are
hate
taking
Sean
pay
McDermott
cuts
here
to stay here. It must be pretty rough.
Yeah.
We haven't seen the detail there, and we haven't seen the specific detail on Dion Dawkins' extension yet. Both of those should get filed tomorrow. We'll see the official paperwork go through, and then we'll see how much cap space that saved. I know a couple folks in the chat asked, how are we doing this? My rough math on just knowing the potential of what Dion and Dawson Knox could save was between 12 and 14 million. Some of the additions are going to have lower first year cap hits. I think that right now we're probably like even with the cap or just barely under after the 3 additions.
But we got some levers
to
pull still.
Yeah, anything else we do, we have not done anything with. Stephon Diggs is the biggest one. That's like 13 million we could save.
We don't
Ed
want
Oliver is like Ed Oliver is another 4 million that we could mess around with to restructure.
Greg, I'm a little confused on that one. I don't know if we missed it. I thought there was some like the Bills got under the cap early, and you and I assumed that it was Ed. Was it not?
So
Ed?
If we go back, it was last Monday. So a week ago from Monday, which is like March 4th or whatever it was. A tweet came out from the NFL Players Association of how much cap space each team had. The Bills were all of a sudden $7.1 million lower on the cap than what we expected. Instead of the 43.6 or whatever it was, they were under by 36.4. And I started playing around. I was like, well, that's weird. And I had done enough of the restructures over and over again. I'm like, that's almost exactly, I think that's what Connor McGovern and Ed Oliver would be. And I went and looked, and they were exactly that amount. If you did their two restructures, it was exactly 7.1. So I'm like, I bet you they've done those two restructures and just we don't know yet
because they don't have to tell it. Yeah.
The team not only don't have to, the Bills never announce restructures.
Right.
They just file the paperwork. They don't do a press release for them.
Right.
Agents don't really have much incentive to announce it because the players are getting the same amount of money. It's not new money.
No.
And if it's a pay cut, like with Knox and Von Miller, they don't like to announce it.
Right.
And when it's a restructure, they're not touting it because they're not getting new money for their client. So they often don't come out until the paperwork gets officially filed. So when it's as big as Josh Allen, any franchise quarterback, those are always going to be announced because it's a big deal and it's a big number. But beyond that, I just assumed that they hadn't announced it. So in reality, I think it already did get done, and we just don't know because the paperwork hasn't been filed yet, but it also hasn't been reported by anyone. Sure. So it could be someone else we don't know about. I don't know. Sure. That's the hard part. Right. It was reported Rasul Douglas has been restructured. He also hasn't been, that paperwork hasn't been filed yet. Josh Allen has been reported. That paperwork hasn't been filed yet. It's all still processing.
Maybe the fax machine's not working.
Yeah, all these things are, and again, I use the same website you guys do. I have a couple contacts that I know that have access to the NFLPA system that can get me copies of contracts, and I can see some things. But ultimately, I use SpotTrack and Over the Cap, just like everybody else does. Those websites are at the same mercy we are. Right. They are simply waiting for the official paperwork to come in. That's why sometimes you see them announce things but not have financial numbers next to them. If you go on most of the sites now, they don't have numbers next to Nicholas Morrow or with Mack Hollins because we don't know yet. They don't know what the numbers are exactly yet. So as you see those things, some of that doesn't move. So again, we have levers to pull. The ones that are out there, again, Stephon Diggs is a really big one. We could also do a little bit of money with Matt Milano. You could do money with Ed Oliver. There's a couple options like that where you could still play around with a little bit more. A Terran extension is a very likely one. And now that we saw Dawkins, I thought Rasul Douglas would be, but honestly, the fact that he's 30, I'm okay if they want to see it through the season again, because I don't think there's that. If he has a nice season and likes it here, I don't think all of a sudden he's going to, like, oh no, he's absolutely leaving. If we're still willing to pay him a reasonable amount of money, he could just be extended then anyways. Right. So I'm not terribly worried about that. I would have been okay if they extended him, but I'm fine with it. Terran is a very obvious one. And as just happened a couple days ago, Kenny Moore, who is the previous all-pro nickel cornerback, since they've introduced that, he just signed the highest nickel corner contract in history, which was 3 years, $30 million. And I joked, I was like, hey, Terran, we want to make you the highest paid nickel cornerback in history. Here's 3 years and $30.3 million. Or honestly, if they make it
32 million
or 36 million, he deserves money. I don't care. Like he deserves money. If it's 10, 11, $12 million a year, that's what he deserves. Make him the highest paid nickel cornerback in history. He's awesome. It's fine. So let's do a couple of the re-signings before we finish with all the new guys that came in. So one that we expected was DaQuan Jones. One that I think both of us had kind of braced ourselves for leaving, but wouldn't have minded, was AJ Epenesa. Which were you more surprised by in that? Was it Cam? So Cam Lewis also came back. We talked Taylor Rapp, I think we knew about last week.
Right.
So Cam Lewis, AJ Epenesa, DaQuan Jones were all brought back. Ty Johnson, one that you were wishing for. Yep. I think that a lot of those, Ty Johnson, Cam Lewis, I think we kind of thought was likely, just not based on the market. DaQuan, we wanted to happen. For me, AJ Epenesa, I would have been fine with. I was just worried somebody else was going to give him way too much money, and I kind of braced myself for him leaving. So I was surprised by that one.
Honestly, I did not expect DaQuan when I first started my wish list process, right? Like my first thing that I do is go through the re-signings. And I was talking to Arik offline and just like, because he's really of all of us is tuned into the most of the players, and especially a guy like DaQuan Jones. He's got a relationship with Jones, and thinking, I was like, dude, like, shoot me straight here. Like, he's my priority re-sign. Is it even possible? Like, should I put him in the green? Is this guy coming back, or is he just gone? And he was like, I just don't see it. I don't think he's going to. And so in my brain, I was just like, yeah, it's still the priority. It still makes the most sense on paper. It's the biggest need heading into free agency. Like, I know wide receiver, we got to fill that room and get it. But in terms of free agents and availability and who made sense, he was the gem of free agency for me. And it just felt like it wasn't going to happen. So for him to come back, and it didn't seem like the market was crazy aggressive for him, and they were able to get him back. That was probably the biggest surprise for me, because in my mind, I just kind of moved on from like, oh, we're going to have to fill this with some of these other free agent bodies, or maybe make it a by committee type approach. So getting him back, absolutely huge. And then you're right, AJ Epenesa is another one. I think there might have been some people that were hoping he was going to get a big contract so that it would play into comp pick bingo a little bit. But I think this is a great re-signing for the Bills. This plays into exactly how Brandon Beane wants to run this team, which is draft, develop, re-sign your own. He's a good player too. He's just lacked reps. When he is getting reps, he's a very efficient end. I think that he is a nice part of a rotation. I think Vaughn still needs to step up. They're banking on Vaughn stepping up and being somewhat close to the guy that he was supposed to be in terms of that more edgy, bendy pass rusher. They still don't have a lot of that, but AJ Epenesa can get there. He can pass rush. He can do some stuff. He can make some pressures on the quarterback. So that's a great addition to the rotation. I'm glad to have him back. So it was a surprise that, you're right. I thought one of these poor franchises would take a swing on a guy that was starting to maybe a little bit slower in his rookie deal, but starting to show that he was an ascending player, because people like ascending players, but Beane was able to keep that in-house. And I think that's a big win for the Bills. I'll take that over the comp pick, keeping him in-house like that.
Well, and the combination is what made it great for me, is that I had assumed we were going to lose AJ Epenesa and get a comp pick for him, and have to wait into the summer to sign a different veteran pass rusher, because Leonard Floyd was also going to wait, but was going to get too much money.
Sure, right.
So when Leonard Floyd signed with San Francisco, I was like, oh, well, that kind of checks my box for the comp pick. And then I was kind of nervous. Oh man. So he got 2 years and 20 million, worth up to more than that. He can make up to 25 million. AJ Epenesa is probably going to get the same thing. He's probably going to get something close because he's younger, and had some good efficiency numbers. And a lot of times stacks are what kind of talking we talked before. Like some of Epenesa's numbers weren't quite as sustainable as the number of sacks he got. So I was like, oh, maybe we're going to lose him too. So when we got him back, all of a sudden I was like, okay, great. Well, how much should we pay him?
Yes.
how much did that cost? Because like I want him back, but no, I didn't want to pay him $10 million a year.
Right.
So when I found out it was 2 years and 12 million, I was 100% on board. That's awesome. So we got a nice comp pick for Leonard Floyd. We kept the younger player, and the younger player for less money.
Yeah,
it checked every box. I was very pleasantly surprised when I found out the details of it. So I was, that ended up being very, very happy. The same thing. Cam Lewis, we got back for like 1.4 million. That's his cap hit here. It's like 1.4 million this year, 1.7 next year. That's fine. Cam Lewis, I don't love Cam Lewis, but he's an NFL roster caliber player. He plays special teams. He can be a backup safety, a backup nickel. Like, that's versatile depth that's there. Ty Johnson is the same thing. Ty Johnson is not some superstar, but every time he got in there, he ran hard. He fell forward. He did that. That's the kind of guy you want on a veteran minimum deal. And I'm perfectly good with all of those guys who were retained and brought back. The same thing that when the Taylor Rapp numbers came out, Taylor Rapp ended up, it was 3 years and 10.6 million. And the first year cap hit, it's 2.8 million. That's perfectly fine. That's not splurge money. That's honestly the exact same money as David Edwards, where it's, hey, here's a baseline number where you are a nice depth piece who's paid well if you're just depth, and here's some incentives that if you win the starting job, you get paid more, which honestly, I kind of wish every contract was that way.
Well, and guys like Cam Lewis, like I've been hard on Cam Lewis in the past, but that's when he's been thrust into starting roles, right? And that's not what he is. That's not what he's supposed to be. What the benefit of him, and this is every NFL coach's dream when you're dealing with an active roster and you're dealing with limited spots, is having that type of versatility where, yeah, we can put him on teams. And if something happens to a safety in game, we can put him there. We've seen him play. We can play him on the boundary. We can play him in the nickel spot. Like, he can move around and do a lot of things. That's going to keep him on a roster. That's going to keep him a game day active player because of that type of versatility. That's one of the problems. Everyone wants to crap on DeMar Hamlin not getting playing time last year. One of the reasons is not that he wasn't a better safety than some of the guys playing ahead of him, is that he's not a great special teams player and he only can play safety. He doesn't do anything else. And so if you have a player with more versatility, they're going to get that game day jersey, right? Like, over another guy. Taylor Rapp's the same way. Like, I don't love Taylor Rapp as a starter right now. It looks like he's going to be slotted into a starting position. I don't
certainly going to compete for a certain spot.
Correct. Yeah. But that contract isn't so much that if you get another guy here later in free agency and draft the guy and he plays really well and takes over that job, you still have a very versatile player that can be a game day active, that can provide some stuff for you, that in the situation, if we get into where there's some of that dime look coming back in, where he can come in and be one of those type of linebacker type players, or Matt Milano struggled with injuries. God forbid he gets hurt again and you're having an issue at the linebacker position. He can kind of brace you in some of those ways. So you're adding versatility on the back end, and these guys are going to be real big chess pieces on game day, even if they aren't starters.
Yeah, 100%. So really pleased with the progress and the pace at which those moves went. All of the moves of different people signing elsewhere and opening up some legitimate shots at compensation picks. So that offset went well, but it was kind of slow. We hadn't seen a lot of new names for a while, literally none. We hadn't added any new names through the whole first day. We were a good chunk into the second day, and then we saw the first one. And of course, I'm going to put this on par with when our first move 2 or 3 years ago was Frank Gore, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, is this all we're going to do?" Like, it's our first move isn't always the most exciting one. Yeah. So our first move was actually a linebacker that I did a write up on 4 years ago when he was with.
I was going to say, if you wrote about it, it's got to be a while ago.
Yeah, I have not written anything in a long time. So Nicholas Morrow is a off-ball linebacker. Last year, he was in Philadelphia. They had some injuries, and he was thrust into an unreasonable ask. Like, they asked him to be their Matt Milano, their Fred Warner, like, to just cover everybody. And he's not that guy. Like, that's not what he is. We signed him, and so last year, what was Brandon Beane's $1.77 million special? The baseline on that change for what is the non-comp pick impacting signing is 1.79. I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to guess that Nicholas Morrow signed for 1.79 million. We'll see when the numbers come out. The fact that no numbers have come out yet tells me usually as much as I
nobody's excited to share them.
Yes, correct. If no agent is excited to share the numbers, that usually tells you all you need to know. So he's basically our Terrell Dotson replacement, and not the Terrell Dotson that we saw play all year this year. What Terrell Dotson would have been. So when we have Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard playing 100% of snaps on the field all the time, because you don't need to take monsters like that off the field, when other teams match with a base set, with two tight ends, with a tight end and a fullback, with any heavy set, goal line, short yardage, we saw, and Arik showed us that, hey, even though we want to be a base nickel and keep Taron Johnson on the field all the time, sometimes you need somebody with a little thump to come in there as the third linebacker, and you need to be able to do that kind of thing. That's what he's going to be. He will be that third linebacker. He'll compete with Balin Spector. He'll compete with Dorian Williams, but it gives us, hey, we don't have to ask AJ Klein to cancel his family vacation. We can be able to have a guy on the field who's played snaps before. He's played a lot of special team snaps. He played a ton of snaps in Philly last year. We don't need him for as much as they asked him to do. But we're taking a guy from a team that played in the NFC Championship game and started, 14 games for them, and he's now going to be our backup third linebacker. And I think that's not a bad spot to be in. Hopefully Milano and Bernard stay healthy, and all we need him for is that special teams role and short yardage, and some of the young guys push him for that spot even. But I feel very comfortable with that kind of signing, even if it was a little deflating as the first one that broke.
Sure. And in a perfect world, to your point, like the younger guys Dorian Williams and Balin Spector beat him out for roster spots and game day active spots. Like that's the hope, right? You hope that those guys start to pan out and they become players that you can put on the field in some of those situations. But even if not, I think right when he got signed, there was a number of people, and I saw it from 12 or so accounts of like, oh, I talked to a buddy from Philly who said he sucks. And it's like, I put out a tweet that was basically saying like, a year ago, if you would have asked us about Terrell Dotson, you would ask, taking a poll of 20 Bills fans, 12 of them would have been like, oh yeah, he sucks. Like he's no good. He can't cover anyone. He can't do anything. He's not a modern linebacker. A lot of what matters with players like this, when you look back at who they've been, whether it's free agency or whatever, pro players, is coaching matters. And we saw with Dotson, coaching matters.
Matters.
In putting him in positions where we know he's not great in coverage. So we're not going to put him out there in known passing downs. We're not going to put him out there and say, hey, go guard tight ends one-on-one in man coverage. Like that's not the world we're going to live in. We're not going to put him out on Deebo Samuel in coverage in a playoff game. So we know that Bobby Babich is going to put a guy like this who has deficiencies in coverage. He's not going to put him in the situation. He's going to do the same types of things we saw with Dotson. So I don't care what he did in Philly in terms of like people coming into me and be like, oh, he was terrible in coverage. Look what he did in the playoffs. Like they are not going to do that with him. That is that. And if they are, everything has gone wrong and we are deficient at linebacker. We have no linebackers left and it's still probably better than AJ Klein. So if people got all worked up over.
Yeah, if God forbid the same thing happens as last year, they'll do the same thing as last year where they'll platoon him.
Sure.
And when it gets to third and long, they'll bring a third safety in and play them a dime linebacker just like we did last year.
Yeah. And so getting upset, I think people were more upset that it wasn't a bigger name first, to your point, than they were actually upset with this is a depth linebacker and special teams player.
Yeah, correct. 100%. If we just did these signings in reverse order and the third one happened first, everything would have been fine. People would have been now excited. So,
and what stinks about this is like when you re-sign your own, it doesn't feel fun and new toys, but like DaQuan Jones is a big free agent signing.
And Epenesa, like DaQuan Jones, Epenesa, take Rapp, like those are impactful players. They're going to play snaps. Like, that's a real thing. Ty Johnson, that's a nice role. So we go through there. That was, not a lot of other exciting things happening. And then we had basically our new Trent Sherfield signing. Mack Hollins was signed, who is, has had an interesting background. He actually had like a 600-yard season 2 years ago in Oakland or Las Vegas. I don't know where they were that year. Wherever they were. Mack Hollins had some decent yards. I will say credit to our guy, Uber Hansen. He pointed out Mack Hollins has more receiving yards the last 2 years than Darnell Mooney, who signed for 3 years, $39 million. So, take that for what it's worth.
That's a Justin Fields stat. But
correct. There's a lot of other qualifiers to that, but it's factually accurate
for sure.
So Mack Hollins is a special teams gunner, a really tough blocker. He's a nice wide receiver 5. Like he is the kind of guy with similar expectations of what we had for Trent Sherfield last year. I know he did not live up to those things. And when we needed to force him into duty, we didn't feel super good about it. Honestly, Mack Hollins is the same. Like we're not going to want him to be a starting receiver, he is a more capable receiver than say what a Taiwan Jones was as a running back. Like he's not a pure special teams guy. He can get out there and block. He can get out there and he actually is pretty good in contested catches. If everybody remembers the famous play where Ryan Fitzpatrick's helmet gets turned sideways and he chucked the ball up, the guy he threw it to was Mack Hollins, who made the crazy sideline catch. If you just look at Mack Hollins' highlight reel, you'd think you were looking at like Mike Williams or something like that, making all these crazy contested catches. He's not that. Like he's there. As you read Brian here, he is a different kind of dude. He has a lot of interesting philosophies. He dresses up like a superhero on game days. He also goes barefoot through like Las Vegas and Manhattan and wears shoes almost never. He has unbelievable hair. Like when I do this with my hands, like this size afro, I'm holding my hands out like 2 feet out from each side of my head. He has enormous, incredible, crazy, like Troy Polamalu hair. He did have it in braids when he signed his contract today, so it's not out wild right now. He doesn't like cats. It's kind of weird. He's a different dude. He's
Yeah.
I will say, however, he's been a captain, a team elected captain by 3 different franchises. 3 different locker rooms have voted him as a team captain. That's pretty wild. Like that happened in with the Raiders, the Dolphins, and the Falcons all had elected him as a captain. So when you heard all the comments of different fan bases, like some of the guys that I mess around with the Dolphins were saying, no, you're going to love this dude. This is a good dude. And a whole bunch of different, the same thing. Our guy, Greg Boris, had some contacts with the Raiders, said the same thing. Like, this is a good dude. You're going to like him. He's a great addition to the locker room. So nice culture fit. Again, people were nervous at first, like, oh, is this our plan to replace Gabe Davis? No, this is a replacement for, Trent Sherfield. That's all it is.
I do think he's probably a plus over Trent Sherfield. I think,
yeah, correct. He's produced more as a receiver than Sherfield ever did.
Yeah, I think he presents more as a receiver. The Trent Sherfield stuff was weird because he had a couple highlights and people took those on Twitter and were like, we can do that more.
There was a couple games where guys got hurt in Miami and he got forced into a little bit more, and
he made some big splash plays. Yeah, and that's not who he is. And I think that I don't want to see Hollins again, if he's getting a lot of targets and a lot of reps, something's gone terribly wrong in the receiver room. But I do think if he is thrust into a situation where we saw Sherfield having to be out there and do stuff, I think he can do a little bit more, and I think that he can be a bit of a more reliable target. Where I do think he is replacing Gabe Davis is into what you said, is that captain role and being that kind of guy in the locker room. Gabe Davis is at 24 years old, being a captain of the team and being voted a captain is pretty big deal. And I keep coming back to, you lost Mitch Morse, you lost Jordan Poyer, you lost all these guys, these culture fits. We know that's important to this team. Getting a guy that can come in, and I don't know if he'll be captain or not, but he can present that type of energy. He can be that type of guy. He can be a good person in the locker room. It matters to Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. And I won't be shocked if we see him come right in and be a special teams captain for this team and replace that, which also not just Trent Sherfield, but what Saren Neal brought on the special teams and being able
Saren Neal, Tyler Medikevich, like Deontay Hardy, Jordan Poyer actually played special team snaps too. Dane Jackson, like a lot of guys who played special team snaps. Terrell Dotson played a ton of special team snaps. We lost a lot of special team snaps. So getting a guy like Nicholas Morrow, like Mack Hollins, like those are needed. Like we need someone to, even though, again, I get it. People are like, oh, we don't need to pay big money. We're not paying big money. All the guys that we brought in. So again, Mack Hollins, his contract was listed as up to $3 million. My guess is it's the $1.79 million with incentives, where if he does happen to play receiver, he can earn more money. And if he plays receiver, God bless him. The 1 year where he actually did start, like he hasn't been a starter anywhere else the rest of his career. 1 year in Vegas, it was in Vegas. He started all 17 games. He had 57 catches for 690 yards. Like that's not nothing. Like that's actual halfway decent production. So it's one of those things where if he needs to play, he's shown that he does have the skill set to be able to do some of those things. And we'll see where any other pieces like that could go.
Yeah.
Our final move, which broke earlier today, I'm going to hold off. I'm going to hold off on that. So last night, after those 2 signings happened, there was a tweet that sent everybody into a fluster. I think Matthew or Michael Barrows, who is the athletic reporter for the San Francisco 49ers, reported that the 49ers had officially released Arik Armstead, which had been talked about before. He's a 6'7", 290-pound monster. He's like the West Coast Calais Campbell.
Unblockable,
big, huge. Yeah, just literally unblockable at stretches. Has been a monster out there along with Nick Bosa and the guys out there in San Francisco. So he got released, but it was because they wanted him to take a pay cut from like the $20 million that they owed him. It was a terrible dead cap hit, and we're like, oh, okay, that it just didn't register to me because that was so far at the other end of the spending pool that I was like, okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. So the night before, late after Mack Hollins and the Nicholas Morrow signings, I went through all the remaining free agents at safety, wide receiver, defensive tackle. I listed Curtis Samuel. I listed some other different positions and at edge, at running back. I listed Tad Johnson on my running back list. Each of those, I didn't even list Arik Armstead because it was so far. Like I didn't list DJ Reader either because I was like, well, it doesn't matter. We're not going to sign guys that expensive. And then in this tweet, Burrows says, keep an eye on Buffalo as a landing spot. And I was like, well, that's a weird thing to just throw out there. Obviously, again, Arik in his contacts poked around. We found out that no, there is interest. It obviously came up. His wife is a physician. She went to DePuy and then got her medical degree at University of Buffalo, has an actual medical practice at ECMC, and also in Sacramento where they lived, and that there was a pull for her to come back home and for her to come here, and they weren't sure what the market was going to be. That went back and forth to the point where, we kind of thought if it was going to be a bidding war, the Bills probably aren't going to win that, but hey, you never know if other teams are anxious or are having a lot of incentives. Maybe we get in the ballpark close enough. And it got to the point where someone felt pretty good about it because Diana Rossini tweeted that he signed with the Buffalo Bills. It was at the exact same time that Ian Rappaport tweeted that he signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And there was actually like a 3-minute window where there was like a source off of who was right. So Diana Rossini, a couple minutes later, deleted her tweet, put out a subsequent tweet saying her contact told her it was a done deal with the Bills and that it ended up not being the case and that he signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So all that said, Arik Armstead is not a Buffalo Bill. Window. There was a moment there where there was some genuine anxiety of like, oh my God, is this really happening? What's going on? I never really thought we could afford to get into that space. He signed with the Jaguars 3 years, 51 million, 17 million a year. I never thought we were going to be in that end of the pool. So as it was happening, of course I got excited because he's a monster and I was going to figure it out. I had pieces in the back of my mind of like, oh, man, I'm not really sure if this makes sense for a 30-year-old who had some injury issues, but he's awesome. So I'll figure it out. I'll get excited about it anyways. So then for all that to happen and then not to be true, it really was a wild 24 hours. And then especially that 5 minutes in between where we thought it was happening, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah. I missed the window of the tweets going out. I was like picking up my kids and then we were playing outside and stuff. So I really missed that window of the tweets going. I'm glad because I am also online too much and I get sucked up in that stuff. And that would have just been not good for my mental health here this week. But yeah, what I miss, Greg, is the days of free agents coming in for visits and trying to find out where they're being taken for rest. Like that stuff doesn't
let him out
happen
of the building.
Yeah.
Don't let Mario Williams out of the building.
Yeah, and having real free agent watches. I miss that world. Now it's just like fast and going. But I was in the same position as you when I saw the first tweet of the interest of the Bills. I couldn't wrap my brain around it. I was like, is this for real? And wanting it, but also realizing like, man, I really don't want them to pull that lever on the Stephon Diggs deal, especially for a 30-year-old, but he's
Even
so
confused,
unblockable.
like, how do we use it when we just re-signed DaQuan Jones and we extended Ed Oliver? Like, it's going to be weird.
And I've been getting a bit of pushback on this one that like this move to me would have been a luxury move. Like I understand more defensive tackles are needed and we need more rotation there.
It
But
probably
I
would have
don't
made it a 3-man rotation with all three of them
Correct.
playing like 65% of snaps each.
Yeah, which would be great for DaQuan Jones too. Like I think that at his age and where he's at his career, it would be nice to have somebody to offset some of those snaps for a long season. But in my brain, I'm thinking it's going to be Ed Oliver, Jones, and then we'll fill in with some lower level depth pieces and rotation. And Armstead feels like a luxury piece that you're going to go get to be part of a rotation. Just in roster building in my brain, I was like, none of this makes sense. We shouldn't do this. This isn't the right way to build a team. But then I'm watching Arik put out the highlights and I was like, yes, no, actually though, that I want that. Give me that. And so
he's unblockable at times. Unblockable.
Yeah, it's tough. But I was seeing the deal he got. I don't know where the Bills were at in terms of the competition for a deal, but I think the Bills lucked out. If it was anywhere close to what he's getting, I do think they lucked out in terms of an aging guy who has had some injury history. He's still going to be good. He's still going to be good for the Jaguars. He's going to put up production, but I think this is one of those deals where if you did it and you pulled all these levers and then like a Von Miller, he comes in and tears something, it's catastrophic to your future and what you're trying to do over the next couple of years. And so that risk, I think they avoided a big risk decision here. And I think that'll be good for them long-term.
Correct. I think you're spot on. Again, I would have been excited. I was trying to figure out like different creative fronts they could use, different things we haven't seen before, and it's exciting. The fact that they were targeting someone like that. It's a shame that it didn't work out, but I did not want to pay the amount that they paid him. It would have been way less. It would have been an incentive laden deal with less guaranteed in fewer years.
But that Jags defensive line now.
Oh God! Trayvon Walker on one side, Josh Allen on the other, Arik Armstead in the middle. That's good for them. They've spent all kinds of crazy money. So in hindsight, the Titans might have screwed us, because if the Titans didn't swoop in and pay Calvin Ridley $1 billion,
right,
then that money that they had set aside for Calvin Ridley, they would have already paid him that and not had that available to go after Arik Armstead. So if the Titans didn't swoop in to honestly waste Calvin Ridley, he ain't going to do anything in Tennessee. Like, they ain't going anywhere. Will Levis isn't all of a sudden leading some high flying passing offense.
But good for him on getting some money.
Yeah. Oh, you got a ton of money. You get 92 million, 23 million a year. God bless him. Get all the money.
People actually thought the Bills were in that ballpark for Ridley.
$23 million a year.
Oh my God.
So instead of $23 million a year, I did what you did. After the Arik Armstead debacle, I was like, all right, I gotta go like get dinner ready, and I can't just be glued to my phone every single second here. I missed the Curtis Samuel signing. I'm like 10 minutes later, I was like, wait, what just happened? What's going on? Like, I missed the first wave of the Curtis Samuel signing. And the Buffalo Bills signed Curtis Samuel to a 3-year, $24 million deal worth up to $30 million with $15 million guaranteed. That basically means it's an $8 million a year deal, and we're locked in for 2 years. So the 2 years at the first $8 million in the first 2 years, we are locked in. As I said here in the chat, basically Mack Hollins is an upgrade over Trent Sherfield. Curtis Samuel is a huge upgrade over Deontay Hardy, and we still don't have an answer for who our other outside receiver is. Right now, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, and Stephon Diggs, all are guys who are really valuable in the slot and can play outside. So we don't have anyone besides Diggs, but as he ages in his career, it becomes less and less, where his primary role is just outside. So I still think anyone who's nervous about, we're not going to draft a receiver, what this signing does is, let's say on draft day, the first 7 or 8 picks, or there's 7 or 8 receivers that go before us at pick 28, you're not locked in to just have to take wide receiver 9. You can take another position like a defensive tackle or a defensive end or a safety or whatever, and maybe take one at 60. I still want to see a premium draft investment at wide receiver. I still hope it's a Xavier Legette or Adonis Mitchell or Keon Coleman or Javon Baker or some big, strong, athletic outside receiver that we can develop. This gives us the luxury of not having to go and do it and force it to pick 28. Because the last time we went to a draft where everybody knew what we were going to do in the first round pick, the Chiefs leapfrogged us to go take Trent McDuffie because everybody knew we had to pick a corner because we were so locked into it. So I like the idea of not having to be locked into it. And Curtis Samuel, I think the same way that whenever we go after an offensive lineman, I go and look and see, hey, what are they saying in trench warfare, and what are the guys over there saying? When we get a receiver, I go and look at what Matt Harmon says. He's the foremost wide receiver expert. He freaking loves Curtis Samuel, maybe to an unhealthy degree. But if you're going to look at Curtis Samuel's numbers, he's played with some pretty poor quarterbacks, and his best season he ever had was with Joe Brady as OC. So I'm a little anxious of exactly what it's going to mean or what it's going to lead to. But I will say, I just saw a tweet here that interested me. If you look at the 7 years prior to coming to Buffalo, Curtis Samuel and Cole Beasley had almost identical numbers before coming to Buffalo and then breaking out. So if you want to tell yourself a story that there's more potential of what's there, you look at guys like Brandon Lloyd. He didn't break out until later. Wes Welker didn't break out till his third team. Robert Woods didn't break out until he finally had a good quarterback. Cole Beasley didn't break out until he finally got to Buffalo. I think there's potential for upside in Curtis Samuel. I don't think he's going to become a superstar, but I think there's a little bit more to show than what we've seen so far with the terrible quarterbacks he's played with.
Yes. Real quick, I still don't believe the Chiefs took Trent McDuffie from the Bills. I don't think Trent McDuffie was on the Bills' radar in that draft. I also am going to push back on the idea of the traditional idea of a boundary receiver, I don't think it matters anymore. I think separation matters, and Samuel gives you that. I think Khalil Shakir gives you that. I think Stephon Diggs gives you that in a different way, through route
You
running.
found a really cool stat on the separation piece.
Yeah, he's right there at 3.3 yards for separation. It's right there with your Tyreek Hills. A bunch of good wide receivers are right there in that area. He gets separation. He can get the yards after catch. He adds speed. I retweeted that with the separation. It was also on a tweet from Next Gen Stats about speed in routes run, and he was at like 9 miles an hour, and the next closest Bill was at like 7 miles an hour or something like that from last
How
year.
quickly he accelerates and get up to speed was really, really up there.
Yeah, and this is exactly what Brandon Beane was talking about adding, right? At getting some speed into this room, getting some yards after catch, trying to create those explosive plays. But the pushback I'm going to give on the idea of these big guys, and not to you necessarily, but when I'm talking to people on Twitter, it's like we need a big boundary guy to go both stretch the field and catch jump balls. One, those are super rare plays in the NFL. You aren't getting a lot of those types of balls down the field. And two, the way defenses are playing is sort of eliminating some of that. That's been a little bit of the problem, right? In the NFL, and where Josh Allen isn't connecting on those as much and as often, is teams are playing too high shells and soft zone coverages, and that sort of eliminates some of that. So how do you offset that is having guys that can get open and work underneath, but still create explosive plays. That's why Khalil Shakir's so awesome, right? He can take a play that's a 5-yard slant and turn it into a 20, 30-yard explosive play. Yeah, here's the stat pulling up here, 9.8 miles per hour within his first second of his routes, which is great acceleration. That's on pace with.
Yeah, the quickest burst in the league, the top 5 was Trey Palmer with the Buccaneers, AJ Brown with the Eagles, Curtis Samuel with the Commanders, Tyreek Hill with the Dolphins, Chris Olave with the Saints. And as you said, they pointed out the highest bill, they averaged 7.95 and 29th in the NFL. So 29th of the 32 teams. Gabe Davis at 8.25, Stephon Diggs at 7.73, adding a guy who is top 3 in the NFL in their acceleration or their burst out of their routes. Is an exciting addition, and it shows the explosiveness that he had, why they lined him up. I think I saw Eric pointed out that he lined up in the backfield more than any receiver in the NFL. I saw Bruce Nolan predicted that he's going to end up with more carries than Ty Johnson on the season.
Maybe.
And I think that some of those things with the jet sweeps that we kind of got away from as we lost Isaiah McKenzie, some of the bubble screens that we were forcing to Stephon Diggs, that's the stuff that Curtis Samuel really flourishes with.
Mm-hmm.
And now not needing to force it to those other people, having somebody who's built for it and has that burst and explosiveness, that's a really fun addition to be able to do.
Yeah, and it's in line. Khalil Shakir can also do these things. So now you have 2 guys that you have to account for that can be these types of players.
On each side.
And I think that they can both play a little bit inside and outside, right? Like Samuel has definitely been better in the slot. He's a 70% slot player, except for 1 year in his career. And he still did pretty well in that 1 year where he was playing on the outside. So he can do both things. I think too much is being said of that he can't play on the boundary. I think that he can do some of that. But really, again, to me, it's get good ball players and figure out how to get the ball into their hands. I think that Brady signed off on this, on the idea that I can do this. And I do think people are sleeping on Khalil Shakir's ability to kick to the outside and do some of those things. He can actually do quite a bit in the contested catch game. He gets good separation. He does a lot of nice stuff out of the slot, but he can stretch the field and he can be a contested catch type player. If you can find a guy in the draft that is tall and is good at those situations, great. I'm not advocating that you don't need those players, but I'm right now, if you went out to play a football game today with your starting wide receivers being Diggs, Shakir, and Samuel, I think you can put a lot of offense and a lot of points up on the board, and they still have the ability, to your point, and I want this, is to them to make a premium investment in wide receiver. What this does, which is a classic Brandon Beane, is ensure that if that rookie needs some time to ease in, or they, don't necessarily trust the rookie right away to come in and play, they have an insurance policy and they don't need to put that pressure on the rookie to come in and be the number 2 receiver right away. You can kind of ease that guy in and put him into the offense, but you have a guy that you're going to get production out of right away.
Yeah, it's one of those things that can come in immediately. And I know a couple people are, asking like, oh, is this just an Isaiah McKenzie or is this just a Deontay Hardy? He's produced far more than what those guys had. And I think if
no
you look at, Yeah, correct. With zero quarterback play, it really, really, kind of stacked up differently. And I'm looking to here to see. I want to show folks what the actual comparative difference was. The real difference is showing like what he is compared to a Gabe Davis. So obviously, Gabe Davis is different. He was an outside receiver. He was, much different in the usage that's there. But when you're talking about, oh, did we just pay? I think I saw someone in the chat here. I don't mean to call this person out, but I saw the comment. I don't want people to get the idea that, oh, we just paid someone with Isaiah McKenzie's usage, $10 million. Well, no, we paid a guy who has more catches and more yards than Gabe Davis. $8 million a year because it's a 3-year. So Gabe Davis got paid almost double the money Curtis Samuel did, and he's had more catches for more yards, more rushing yards. Gabe had more touchdowns. So it's not like this was some crazy, guy who's never produced before. He's certainly had production. And he did that with horrendous quarterbacks, and Gabe did that with Josh Allen. So the idea that, we don't know what else he can do. We don't know what other upside he got. Gabe Davis got paid more. So I'm not saying he's better, but the idea that, we just paid for some Isaiah McKenzie clone is not accurate. Like,
Autumn's right here too. Not only did he have bad quarterback play, but Terry McLaurin's on that team and Jahan Dotson was on his team too. So he wasn't going to be a primary target in that offense just because, and that's not a knock on Curtis Samuel. Those guys are elite wide receivers.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things where being able to look at the potential for what he could do. Again, I don't even think the 1,000-yard season is really in the cards for him, but another high efficiency, he's had over 600 yards 5 times in his career. So I expect another like 600 to 800 yard season with some exciting touchdowns. Every year he's had 121 carries in his career. So he's a guy that's had 41 carries, 38 carries. So you're talking like 2 or 3 times a game to be able to do that and then be able to show more. And I know some people like to throw out Debo and Debo Light and a lot of things. Debo Samuel is like a 1 of 1. If you think about some of the usage that San Francisco has, sure, I can see some of the, schemed up usage that a guy like Debo has, but Debo Samuel is a very, very special player. So that's unfair to compare him to. Correct. But some of the things
Khalil
we
Shakir
did use,
Debo Light, we can only have one of those.
Well, and the usage we had for Khalil Shakir, now it doesn't have to be solely just him. Now we have multiple guys who can do a bubble screen, who can do a jet sweep, who can do the
play out of the slot. Like what happens if one of those guys gets hurt? Now you have multiple options playing out of that role. And so that also matters in this.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's exciting to be able to see. So obviously those are the only 3 new additions we have so far. I was kind of hoping maybe during the show some news would break. I haven't seen anything exciting happen. I think
Justin Simmons yet?
No Justin Simmons yet. But let's talk about what is something that you now want to see us focus on. Obviously, we saw last year they didn't sign Taylor Rapp until March 31st. Last year they didn't sign Leonard Floyd until June. They didn't sign Poona Ford until into July. There's a lot of different moves that don't always happen immediately. We're only, we're literally like 24 hours into the new league year. Thank you very much, Jason. You guys are awesome. And he joined the Slack channels. Shout out. Welcome to the Slack channel. We had a great time in there the last couple of days. It's been fantastic in there. He asks, do you think Brady would be smart to move the receivers around, and will he do it outside the slot and vice versa? Yes, he should, and he 100% will. Yeah. He 100% will.
I actually expect tight ends to move around a little bit too. Yeah. I think Kincaid will move around in that way too.
So obviously with Jason signing up here, why don't you guys listen to these guys on what Jason signed up for? Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore, or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
all for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
So in our final closing segment here, we'll talk about some of the remaining positions that are still open. I'll share some of the lists that I built going through the last couple days here. We haven't seen a new addition at corner. Like, that's something. I know there was a tweet about Levi Wallace wanting to be back in town. Tabir Thomas is a guy that Eric did some work on. He has some nickel flexibility. I'd mentioned Miles Bryant. Adoree Jackson is a guy who has some return ability. Rock Yassin, Christian Fulton, Levi Wallace. We saw Dane Jackson go. I assume Levi Wallace would be your choice out of that group.
I would like a little more flexibility to your point of kicking inside, but I would welcome Levi Wallace as raises the floor of depth for you. And I know Bills fans have a bad taste in their mouth for him, but God forbid something happens and that room starts to thin out. He could come in and start and be fine and keep that floor raised. And so it would be a nice insurance policy. I would definitely bring him back.
Yeah, I my choice might be Adoree Jackson just to have the return ability, to have that flexibility there. Because right now I don't know for sure who our returner is. Maybe it's Khalil Shakir. Maybe I don't know. So Tabir Thomas is another guy who has nickel flexibility and is a possibility to look at there. Obviously, defensive tackle. I have no idea what end of the spectrum they're looking to spend after they dabbled with Arik Armstead, but we saw guys like Sheldon Rankins and Quentin Jefferson and Benito Jones all sign. So some names that are still out there. T.R. Tart is a guy who you could pair DaQuan Jones with at nose tackle. Same thing, Austin Johnson, Sebastian Joseph Day. There's a couple other names out there, but those are some guys there. I would love to see any of those three that have that ability to platoon with DaQuan.
I thought maybe T.R. Tart wouldn't be in the realm of possibility. I'm surprised that he hasn't gone quicker in free agency a little bit here. And with them being maybe willing to spend some money on Armstead, made me sort of think that maybe he will have a look at somebody like that, and that maybe they'll spend a little bit more than I thought they would originally on that position. So that would be one. And then I still think they should just give Linval a contract and tell him to just hang out for a few months and see what happens and warm up.
Yeah. So Ned Flanders here. Yes, you are old. I'm old too. I didn't really know either. The Slack channel is the same as a Discord. It's like a WhatsApp or some of the different chat groups. We use it as our own private Cover One, like Bills group. Although there's a Sabres channel and a general and a politics discussion and movies and TV shows, it's turned into its own little world that we love very, very much. It's awesome. We have a lot of people that we've known in there for years now, but it is our own personal little Bills social media bubble. Anytime that we're not a news breaking organization, but anytime we have news, we do share it in there first. So people knew about the David Edwards re-signing in there early. People knew about the DaQuan Jones signing in there early. People knew about different things. Whenever we find out about those things, you find out about it in there first. And that's when you sign up for One Pass, you get an invite into our Slack channel. That is what that is.
Yeah.
Another position that I'm a little torn on, running back. I wouldn't have minded if our signing was a guy like Deontay Foreman. I had wanted maybe an AJ Dillon or a Gus Edwards. Both of them.
Don't say AJ Dillon on Twitter. People will bury you.
Yeah, everyone hates AJ Dillon. It's super weird.
That guy. It's fantasy. Fantasy football has rotted people's brains. Somebody drafted him, and now they're mad.
So Matt Harmon just posted another tweet of him going crazy about Curtis Samuel. So if anybody wants to go see Reception Perception Gem Curtis Samuel, he just put out another one.
There we go.
I still kind of want the Deontay Foreman type. I don't care if it's him or if we draft Braylon Allen or Audric Estime or Ray Davis or someone like that. I just want. He actually gets a little extra money every single time when we say Audric Estime. I want one of those big, thick power backs. I want that in our tool chest. I want the new Latavius Murray, Leonard Fournette. I want that guy. I don't care if we draft it or sign it. I don't know that we need 4 running backs. So signing another guy and drafting a guy is a little weird. So if we sign Deontay Foreman, I'm good. Then we don't need to draft a running back. And then we have, because James Cook, Deontay Foreman, and Ty Johnson is a perfectly good modern backfield. I'm good with that. now I probably would prefer to wait and get me one of those, whoever the biggest, most athletic, biggest, fastest guy left in the 5th round. I want that running back. Whoever's left, just pick the biggest, fastest guy. I want that guy. I won't be mad if we sign Foreman because I do think that there was some value in doing that, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fine with rounding out that running back room, whatever way they want. They did exactly what I wanted them to do, is bring back Ty Johnson. I love that combo, that 1-2 punch. I think Ty Johnson can do some of the short yardage stuff just enough.
He runs hard.
Take the load off.
Falls forward.
And as I know people want Josh to do it less, he's not going to do it that much less. They will still use Josh Allen in a lot of the short yardage stuff, and it's very successful in the way that
I want another guy for September through November.
Sure.
Josh starts to run more December and on. I do want another guy to soak up some of those hits for the first 2 or 3 months of the season.
Yeah. Again, listen to Cromer talk with Eric Wood, and he's like, I've never been around a quarterback that is like, hey, because Cromer's the run game coordinator, and he was saying he comes up to him at the beginning of the week of like, hey, get me one early in the game because I got to set my pads. There's no other quarterbacks that do that. He's just a crazy man. He's a psycho.
He's a sicko.
Safety's the big
Ned,
one.
I'm looking for it. Ned said he's signing up for One Pass now because of our sales pitch. So
welcome to the
appreciate
community.
You, man. Looking forward to seeing you in there. I'll introduce you once I learn your real name, unless you do sign up under Ned Flanders. I'll welcome you into the chat.
Yeah, for sure. Safety is the big one, I think, still is, and I think that's the one that fans are most anxious to see get addressed. And
Cam Curl, Justin Simmons, Julian Blackman, Jordan Fuller, Mike Edwards, and Jaron Curse. Those are the names I still have out there that were on my original list.
And again, I was out on the idea of Curl, and just in terms of I thought he's going to get more than the Bills would be willing to offer at that position. But again, with them being in on Armstead, maybe there's some more money that they have.
At some point here, some of those spots have been soaked up because Deshaun Elliott signed for Deshaun Elliott signed for 2 years, $6 million.
Sure.
He got $3 million a year. So at some point here, the teams willing to spend money have spent the money.
Correct.
So one of those guys, at least one out of, I would say, Julian Blackman, Jordan Fuller are probably a little bit higher, but close with Mike Edwards. Cam Curl and Justin Simmons are a full tier above.
Yeah.
But if we can get, again, if we get Cam Curl and Justin Simmons, that's awesome. I don't expect that to happen. I want to throw Quandre Diggs in there too. Quandre Diggs is probably in between those two tiers. Signing Quandre Diggs or Justin Simmons means no comp pick impact, but he's in there. Yeah. One of those guys is going to lose this game in musical chairs and sign somewhere for cheap, and I want one of them to be in Buffalo.
Yeah, if it's going to be one of those high-end guys, I'd like that. I still keep coming back to like that Goldilocks guy for Brandon Beane is Mike Edwards for me, but maybe that's just because he was such a draft crush of mine, and I wanted him then, and now I want to get him back, and it's looking like that would be a very affordable way to have a fit at safety who has had some good reps before. So any of those guys, but I do think that's probably the next piece to fall here in free agency is that we'll see a safety. I know they're not done there. It sounds like they're sniffing around. And so I expect one of those guys here to come up and that be the next shoe to fall.
And I expect 2 additions. I expect one more signing, a starting caliber signing, and a draft pick. Sure. And then the draft pick will compete with Taylor Rapp for the other starting spot. And I expect and DeMar Hamlin. I think he'll be in the running to compete.
Thanks for saying that for me.
I did literally only for you. And I think the guy we signed will be pretty locked in as a starter. I expect the same thing at defensive end. I think we're going to draft one, but I think we might sign one too.
I think Shaq Lawson would be fine. Bring back
Shaq Lawson's out there. Jerry Hughes is a free agent.
I would love to bring back Jerry.
Jerry Hughes is still out there.
Yeah.
Carl Lawson, Daryl Taylor, and DJ Woonham signed. Casey Toohill, James Smith-Williams. At the higher end, again, I didn't think we were going to be in this, but Arik Armstead was in the running, so you never know. Chase Young, Mike Dana, Jadeveon Clowney, Emmanuel Ogbah are all out there. I know Eric thought there was some interest with Emmanuel Ogbah, and he's a guy who would not impact the comp pick formula because he got released. So again, I don't for sure know who's in the running there right now. We've got Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, and Von Miller. There's a chance we just draft someone, but we could sign one of those guys and make that a little more flexible, where then we only need to worry about drafting a defensive tackle, or drafting a fifth guy and having 5 defensive ends. So we'll see where those ones go. I think safety is by far the most likely. I do think we're probably done at receiver now, because we've signed 2 receivers who are both pretty likely to make the roster, and I still think we'll draft one there. I think we're going to add another running back, whether it's the draft or free agency. I think some of those different pieces are still to come here, but I'd say a corner and a safety are still pretty likely. And I do think that we're obviously in the market for a defensive lineman, because we obviously heard about Armstead earlier. Done 716 saying Yannick Ngakoue is still out there, so there's still some pieces floating around.
I mean, interior defensive line, they just need bodies. So even if it's not
we still only have 2.
Yes, they need to get some guys in here just to fill out a roster, even before the draft. So they're definitely going to bring in defensive linemen. It's just a matter of the tier.
So a couple different pieces here, looking through some of the questions. Elizabeth was asking, do we know any of the details on Dodson's contract yet? No, I actually was searching right up until the start of the show. We have not seen any of the money there. I believe he's going to be a comp pick formula guy, and that Seattle signed him to be a starter. They were one of the teams remaining with a starting spot after they lost Bobby Wagner. I expect him to be there and to be a starter. I expect that to happen. I don't know the number yet, so it's technically possible it won't be. We'll see. But I expect that to be reported. Looking through the rest of the questions.
I'm surprised we're not getting more Justin Shorter truthers here in the mentions. Because I felt like they'd be a little bit louder this year, but they're letting me down.
I do think it's kind of Mack Hollins versus Justin Shorter for game day active. I think there's a chance Mack Hollins makes Justin Shorter a game day inactive, or that we have 6 guys and that they're 2 of the core special teamers. Now that we lost some of the other guys, they could be the 2 gunners on each side. So that's a possibility as well. We'll see where that one goes. And I saw here Tim wanted me to issue a formal apology because I was $500,000 off on my Curtis Samuel projection for his contract. So I do feel great shame.
$500,000 is life-changing money for guys like us.
For normal people, for normal
folk.
I had projected I projected 3 years, $27 million for $9 million a year and $15 million guaranteed. It ended up 3 years for 24, although he could earn up to 30. And $15 million guaranteed. So I was a little bit off. I was pretty close, but I was a little bit off.
Shame.
Yeah, it's a shame. What are you guys gonna do? And then the final one, I know a couple of people asked, what is the cap looking like? How are we affording these guys again? There's a lot of moving parts. Honestly, with the Curtis Samuel signing, I have us like real close to dead even or barely under the cap. So I think we're kind of at the point now, bringing back AJ Epenesa, bringing back DaQuan Jones, adding Curtis Samuel. We're out of spending money. So the fact that they were in on Arik Armstead means they're willing to pull some other levers. So if that's Ed Oliver, if that's Matt Milano, or a big one, if it's Stephon Diggs, they can create more cap space. I am under the impression that they're willing to do that for the right move, but I also hope that they don't just do it just in case and then see if they can spend it. If they don't need to, let's not kick that can down the road on Stephon Diggs. Armstead's a guy I would have been willing to do it. I'll be honest, Justin Simmons is a guy I'd be willing to do it for. If we had a chance to get Justin Simmons, who could come in, he's been an all-pro for the last 5 years. He doesn't impact the comp pick formula. He's still playing at an elite level. If we had a chance to get Justin Simmons as our starting safety, I'll restructure Stephon Diggs for that, but I need it to be that level. I need it to be like a really impactful high-end guy. There's not a ton of those out there that I'd be willing to pull that lever for. He might actually be the only one. I guess maybe Cam Curl because he's younger and also good, but maybe even that one, maybe Justin Simmons at least is coming off an all-pro season.
Sure.
But those would be the 2 I'd consider. Other than that, I want to keep that in our back pocket.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else for the people before we sign off here? I'm glad I ended up having a family emergency last night. My son vomited all over our house. So we had to bump the show. Wow. But now we got the Arik Armstead drama. We got the Curtis Samuel signing. Ended up being a great show, delayed to Thursday night.
Yes. I almost didn't make it. We had some drama here with my kids.
I felt bad that we rescheduled for me yesterday.
I know. I messaged Greg like an hour before the show. I was like, I don't know if this is going to work tonight, pal. But it ended up being fine, and we were here, and I'm glad we did it because this was a good exercise too to run over. It's been such a hectic week. The Dion Dawkins thing we were talking before online, it felt like a lifetime ago. Just from this week with all the stuff, being chronically online is probably not good for our health and the ebbs and flows of free agency. But so good to kind of catch up, run through, and see what the next plans are. And I think we're aligned on that. So it was good to chat with you about it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Looking forward to it. I've got some travel next week, so we'll see. Maybe it'll be a Wednesday show. Maybe it'll be a Thursday show next week. We'll see when we get rolling again. But we're looking forward to it. Next week, we'll do another free agency recap. And then we'll do, as we go from free agency, we'll start to slowly transition into draft
You're gonna force me to do a mock draft, aren't you?
I have kept my powder clean. I have not done a single mock draft on any website, and I won't until we transition over. I'm going to try to wait for April 1st. I don't know if I can wait all the way till April, but I will not do it until we're done with free agency shows. And then I might even do it live on the show. I might do my first mock draft live on the show.
I've done
but
two.
I'm going to wait.
They didn't go well.
They didn't go well. Yeah. All right, guys, we appreciate it. This has been a ton of fun to chat. You guys were awesome tonight. We really, really appreciate you. I know this has been a lot of fun. Anyone else? I know Ned Flanders signed up for the one pass. This is the time to do it. It's a ton of fun. It is the best time. Honestly, it might even be better than game days. Like during free agency might be the best time to be in the Slack channel. Everybody's constantly sharing all the latest news and talking about different things back and forth. It's a ton of fun. So we really, really do recommend it. Thank you guys for the ones who have signed up. We've done a really cool giveaway. We're going to be giving away on draft night. We're giving away a PS5, a Josh Allen jersey, a Bills neon sign, all kinds of cool stuff giving away to the some of the lucky people who signed up here over the last little bit. I don't know. Apparently, someone's saying that Keenan Allen just got traded to the Bears. That's interesting. We'll see if that's true. Last time I got okey doke by somebody in the chat. So
yeah, you can't trust the internet. You got to go confirm that yourself.
No, I'm seeing it. It's real. Okay. That is official. Keenan Allen has been traded to the Bears. It's pretty wild.
Bears just keep bearsing, man.
Crazy. It's madness. All right, guys. We appreciate you guys very, very much. On behalf of our awesome producer, Chris Kepner and Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.